Welcome to On Purpose with Paul. I am Paul Peters, your amazing host, entrepreneur, business owner, founder of the Nehemiah Project, and best-selling author. Today, we're going to be talking about how do you find your purpose in your calling.
My name is Paul Peters. I'm a proud father of the 3 kids. I always want to put that as a priority for me. I have a company called Covenant Case Management Services in North Carolina, where I primarily work with folks with intellectual disability, mental health, substance abuse. We are looking to expand outside of North Carolina this year. Also have a nonprofit based in North Carolina called the Nehemiah Project. We basically work with individuals that are struggling with addiction, homelessness, seniors, veterans, homeless, and at-risk kids, domestic violence victims, and those with mental health, intellectual disabilities. I want to take my message about what I have discovered helping people find their purpose, and I want to take it worldwide, because I believe if people find their purpose, they're going to find their joy, they're going to find the reason for their existence and how they connect to this world.
Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to share a little bit about my story and why I'm doing this show, which is called On Purpose with Paul. It's very important that we all understand that every one of us has a calling on our life. Every one of us has a purpose to fulfill. Myself, as a believer, we all are gifted by God with something to do in this life. I think one of the biggest questions we ask ourselves is, what am I called to do? What is my reason for being here? And I really put that upon myself when I wrote my first book, which is called Discovering and Embracing Your Life Purpose. Much of the principles of what I went through, there's actually a story of a man named Tim. Much of it's about myself. Some of it is things that I experienced. Some of the things that I learned as I counseled several people. And I felt it very important. If I had that need, that desire to discover and embrace my life purpose, who else had that same desire? Because when you want to get to the end of your life, you want to be able to say, I mattered, I meant something, I left a legacy. And for me, purpose had everything to do with it. And so when I was discovering my purpose, and it took me a very, very long time to discover that, I want to share a little bit about my story of how I came to discover my purpose. Because it's in the discovery, it's the finding. And God often says, if you ask, you will receive. If you seek, you will find. And I believe He wants us to seek after what our purpose is. He put that within us like a seed. And it takes time. Many times it takes trials. It takes tribulations, challenges in order to bring that forth. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the youngest of 6. I was born in 1964 during the turbulent times of the 60s. My mom was married, and unfortunately did not have the best of father. He ended up going to jail for attempted murder of my mom after I was just a year old. And so my mom was in the hospital for a whole year while we were divided amongst the relatives, and so did not have a very good beginning. I was told by my family that my father, after he got out of jail, had tried to come and kidnap me. I was just a baby, don't remember much of that. But my mom pretty much raised all 6 of us. She was a very strong woman and my hero. And after that time, we moved, and my mom worked as a waitress most of her life. And dealing with the many struggles as a kid, especially being the youngest and trying to find my way, I struggled with self-image. I struggled with who I am as a person. Not having a father figure, that was very challenging for me. Most of our sense of who we are comes from our mom or our dad. For a male, a lot of times it comes from a male, and my father. I didn't have that father figure, so I grew up really not having a father figure. My mom had a boyfriend. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was probably about 8. And then my mom remarried when I was about 10 or 11, and that was my stepfather. But he really never embraced us as his children. So I never really had a good attachment to a father figure. And that's challenging for any young man who wants to figure out what they want to do in life. Like many of you, it's like, I wanted to do this. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I just did not want to be in pain and suffer. And as a child and trying to figure out my way in life, I did struggle a lot. I was looking to people to please me, or so I can please them and win their recognition. That was something I sought for because I did not get it in the father figure. And so I often got involved with the wrong people, the wrong relationships, and I struggled much of my teen life. That ended up, for me, getting into alcohol and some things that really were not very healthy for me. And I remember it pretty much hit rock bottom. I had dropped out of school for a year and drank heavily. I was able to get back into school, but I was pushing myself so very hard. And I really had a nervous breakdown when I was in college. I was able to get over that through some help. And through that, I was able to get my degree, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I took some jobs working in restaurants and different things like that in sales. But there was a missing element. And for me, that missing element was that relationship with a father figure. And that father figure was so vital for me. I remember not having that relationship with my father. My father actually passed away when I was 13. The only benefit I got from my father, is kind of funny, is my mom got the insurance from Social Security. And we took a trip to Hawaii, one of the best trips I've ever had. But did it ever replace the need for a father? No, it never did. It was a temporary satisfaction. So that hole that was missing, that relationship that was vital to have with my father, was one of the key reasons why I didn't have a sense of purpose growing up, and why I felt so empty in my soul. And it got to a point, at one point, when my life choices, because of what I grew up in, the situation, not taking responsibility, being the victim, I made some bad choices. And one of those was to drink while I was driving. That ultimately led to a crash that ended up where my car was totaled. And then, of course, then the domino effect. I lost my job. I was then out on the streets in Chicago in the wintertime. I was homeless. I was destitute. I was lonely. And I felt abandoned. And I had no one other than my family. But in my pride, I didn't reach out to my family. I thought, there's no hope. I have no future. And it was at that time that I contemplated suicide. And I was very close. I was actually on my way after I got kicked out of a friend's house because he didn't want me living there. I actually started walking into the water of Lake Michigan. Now understand, this was December. I wouldn't have to be in water very long to be in a situation where I would no longer breathe. And there was a voice. Was it a auditory voice? I couldn't tell you at that moment. I was just such in despair. But the voice called me and said to me, I have something for you to do. I have a plan and I had a purpose. Did I know exactly what that meant? No, but I knew enough not to go forward with the attempt on my life. And it was a long journey from that point that I took. I was probably 22, 23 at the time. And it took me probably into my mid-40s to begin to get an understanding of what my purpose was. And my purpose really was rooted back into the failed relationship that I never had with my father. And it was in that desperation, in that despair, in that hopelessness that I cried out to me as a believer in regards to crying out to the Father, Father of God. Many of us may have a belief system of what that looks like. I want to believe the majority of people believe in some concept of God. And because I did not have a father figure, I reached out to the only father that I knew, because mine was now long deceased. And I needed the very love, mercy, compassion that every child desires. And I found it in God. And I began to develop a relationship with God that continues to grow. You will never, ever get to a point where you're so full of God. The more you desire Him, God says, if you seek me, you will find me. And I was on that long pursuit, that long journey to seek God, because somehow without fully understanding, it's in that relationship with the Father. My belief is God created each and every one of us. So if you want to know your purpose and why you're created, you go to the Creator. And did I have a relationship with God? Kinda. I remember going to summer camp when I was 13 and them talking about Jesus and the relationship, and much because most of my life was being a people pleaser, I went ahead and went forward. I didn't fully understand what that meant. How do you love a God you cannot see? And so it was in the times of the trial. Remember what I shared with you. Sometimes in your trials and your tribulations, that's when you find your answers. It's painful, but the Bible also talks about God will be a refining fire. I'm not sure if you all know how gold is refined. It's refined based on the heat and the pressure applied to the gold. Because what ends up happening to get what is called the dross, the part of the gold that needs to be lifted out, to be scooped out, so the gold can be purified. That is the same process that God uses with us. He uses a refining fire, which is trials, tribulations, and challenges, to bring out the very character of Himself in us, so that once He looks at us, people will see God in us. And I was so distraught and had such a low sense of who I was because, one, the choices I had made, I never really felt loved. I felt loved by my mom. I felt loved by my family, but the love that I craved was the love of a father. And in my desire to have that love, and it was a long journey. Like I said, it was about 24 years because, one, if you're like, any of you are like me, I was a little stubborn. I was a little proud. I thought, even though I'm back on my feet to a certain extent, and I'll give more detail on that, I still had to be humble because God had to do a work in me. Because remember, He created us with purpose. When we come into this world, we're created as a beautiful, innocent child. And as we experience life, we get a little tainted. We get a little jaded. And especially if we're raised in a situation that's not favorable. In my situation, I was quote-unquote an at-risk kid. My father abandoned us, primarily because of what he did to my mom. And my mom, single parent, raised all 6 of us, 5 boys and 1 girl. And she was amazing, and she did her best. But just to give you a little bit of a backstory on my mom was raised in an alcoholic home. And so it's the home life that begins to develop what we do and who we are as a person. And often, sometimes, God has to intervene in those situations to use those experiences to help us to see what He's called us to do in life. We do have to take a quick break, but we will be right back after these few messages.